I am getting sued by Ethan Klein. Ethan Klein, millionaire and host of the H3 podcast, has sued me for defamation. Here's the complaint. It's 31 pages.
I am being sued by Ethan Klein.
What the fuck?
Man, Ethan Klein has become like the Nintendo of YouTubers. He is extraordinarily litigious.
You heard that correctly. YouTuber Ethan Klein is suing another content creator, and it's getting comical at this point. This time it's Idubbbz, and this seems to be the lawsuit that's garnering the most attention because Idubbbz is by far and away the most prominent person Ethan Klein has sued to date. But Ethan Klein is also suing Noah Samsen simultaneously, who criticized him in a video. And before that, he sued Denims and Frogan and Caseytron, all for copyright infringement after they dared to react to his content, Nuke of Hassan Piker, on their streams. And he also used the threat of litigation against streamer Shonda Black to pressure journalists Taylor Lorenz and Kat Tenbarge into apologizing to him for calling him a misogynist for suing the aforementioned three women. And they both complied in order to spare Shonda Black the agony of fighting Ethan Klein in court. And as journalist Kat Tenbarge explained in a follow-up piece after that kerfuffle, Klein only announced his intent to sue Shonda Black for purposes of, quote, gender equality, as he put it in an Instagram post, but he later promised to not follow through if his critics sincerely apologized by a certain date and time, like he was some sort of a fucking evil movie villain. So I don't know if he gets some sort of sick, twisted pleasure out of doing this, but the people on the receiving end, they aren't enjoying it very much. Caseytron, for example, who he sued for copyright infringement, explained how the lawsuit affected her and her family.
I got served. My dad answered the door. The next thing I know, my dad comes in and he's like fucking crying. You know, it's really fucking traumatic to see your dad cry like that. You know, like that's what really like has me like so freaked out, is seeing like how emotional my dad got about it.
Now, she later settled in court to put an end to the misery, and she subsequently read a statement on stream, presumably written by Ethan Klein or his attorney, where she admitted culpability. And people who watched her video said it felt like a hostage video, because it very much did. I watched it, and it was really uncomfortable to see, and you could just tell that she was at the end of her rope and willing to do whatever it took to put an end to this. And on the subject of hostage-style videos, Charlie, aka Moist Critical, denounced Ethan Klein's lawsuit against Idubbbz, and it was clear that he also was walking on eggshells the entire time and went out of his way to be extra charitable towards Ethan Klein, even though he vehemently disagreed with this lawsuit. And he topped off his video by reading an entire fucking wall of text written by one of Klein's people, presumably to shield himself from any potential litigation for daring to criticize Ethan Klein as well. And Moist Critical is definitely wealthy enough to not be financially ruined by a frivolous defamation lawsuit, but it still takes time and energy to defend himself against it in court. And I'm assuming Charlie, like most normal people, would rather not do that. Ethan Klein, however, has no problem wasting his time in court because, like most wealthy people, he's likely realized that he has a tremendous amount of power over his critics who simply don't have the time because they work, or endless amount of money to defend themselves in court, even if they know that they would win. Because, you know, even if you're in the right in these kinds of situations, our legal system favors individuals with the most money. And the internet is getting a real-time lesson about this thanks to Reckless Ben's videos about bricks and minifigs. Now, this is a huge rabbit hole, but the TLDR is that a corporation allegedly refused to return thousands of dollars in Lego to a man who signed a contract with them to sell it for him. And even though he was obviously in the right, the company knew that they had the legal advantage simply because of the endless resources at their disposal that he lacked.
So I went down to the store, brought a copy of the contract. We're like, you need to let me in back and let me see the sets that you still have. All you have to do is let me in back. We can go that route or we can go to court. And the guy just looks at me, crosses his arms and goes, let me tell you what's going to happen. If we go to court, we're going to drag this thing out so long, and you're going to end up spending so much more money than your collection is ever worth or what you ever would have gotten on it, that it ain't worth it, man. So if that's the route you want to go, and I go, that's really the route you want to go, rather than just letting me walk in there. And he goes, nope.
Dang.
What am I to do?
And that, my friends, is the American legal system in a nutshell. By the way, the YouTuber who posted this, Reckless Ben, has officially been silenced by the company who made that threat, and a judge granted them a temporary restraining order against Reckless Ben, so if he posts the third part of his expose on the company, he risks going to jail. And yes, they are suing him now because if you're wealthy and you want to stop people from criticizing you, there's an easy thing that you can do to get them to shut up. You can sue them. We see how it works with bricks and minifigs. And this is a common tactic used by wealthy individuals as well as corporations. Media Matters was destroyed by Elon Musk's defamation lawsuit against them, and countless press outlets have been sued by our petulant president for reports that they published about him that he didn't like. On top of that, Matt Taibbi sued journalist Owen Higgins for defamation because he didn't like how he was portrayed in Higgins' book, but thankfully he lost after Higgins chose to fight it. J.K. Rowling also used her vast wealth to force apologies from her critics over the threat of litigation. And I'm starting to notice this trend where even millionaires are now learning that they too can silence their critics just as effectively as billionaires, simply with the mere threat of litigation. YouTuber David Pakman threatened to sue journalist Taylor Lorenz after she published a report about his affiliation with Chorus that he didn't like. Kim Iverson threatened to sue me because I posted a video criticizing her commentary about Elliot Page. Now, Pakman and Iverson never followed through on those threats, but I think that they suspected that the threat of a long, drawn-out lawsuit would be enough to get all of their other critics to think twice before criticizing them. And that's really the entire point. It's called a strategic lawsuit against public participation, or SLAPP. And as the ACLU explains, one of the key characteristics of a SLAPP suit is that the lawsuit is not necessarily designed to achieve a favorable verdict. Instead, it is designed to intimidate the target in order to discourage them and others from speaking out on an issue of public importance. In addition to engendering fear and intimidation, the party initiating the SLAPP suit, SLAPP-or, often seeks to bleed the other party, SLAPP-E, of resources and produce a chilling effect not only on the SLAPP-E's expression of First Amendment rights, but also on those who consider speaking out on the issue in the future. In essence, SLAPPs are designed to discourage public discussion by using our legal system to choke the exercise of free speech. And this tactic by the wealthy has become so common that states have actually had to pass laws to address it, so that way regular people are still able to criticize the powerful without having their lives ruined financially. And I'm thankful, given what I do, that in my state of Oregon, we have really strong protections against SLAPP suits where the slapper wouldn't just get their lawsuit thrown out of court, they'd be forced to pay the slappy's legal fees. And as critical as I am of the United States, specifically our legal system, the one thing that I think we do right that other countries don't is that we have a First Amendment with really strong protections for free speech. And the precedent that's been established has made defamation in particular a really high bar to clear, especially if it's against a public figure. In the 1964 Supreme Court decision, New York Times v. Sullivan, the court held that in order to sustain a claim of defamation or libel, the First Amendment requires that the plaintiff show that the defendant knew that a statement was false or was reckless in deciding to publish the information without investigating whether it was accurate. So they've got to prove intent. And if it wasn't already obvious, it's really, really hard to prove malicious intent. But even though that's a high threshold, litigious rich people can still use defamation lawsuits or the threat of them to silence their critics for the fact that it's still going to be very, very expensive for the critics to defend themselves in court, even if they would win. Because again, it's not necessarily about winning defamation lawsuits. It's about intimidation. It's intended to strike fear in the hearts of your critics, to make them fear that they will be financially ruined if they don't shut the fuck up. But before Ethan Klein became the Nintendo of YouTube, as Charlie put it, he was also the subject of frivolous litigation himself by wealthy people. Multi-millionaire Ryan Kavanaugh sued him for broadcasting a short clip of a Jake Paul fight, and Kavanaugh later sued him for defamation as well. And before that, when Ethan Klein was around the same size as the people he's now suing, he was sued by a fellow content creator who accused him of copyright infringement and defamation. And thankfully, Ethan Klein fought him in court, and he won, even though it was one of the most stressful things him and his wife have ever had to endure.
There were three claims: the copyright infringement, misrepresentation, because he filed a takedown and we did a counter takedown, and defamation.
So he was suing us for three different things, and the judge says, take this L for copyright, Take this L for misrepresentation, and oh my god, take this L too for defamation. The key evidence in the record consists of Klein and Haas's videos themselves. Any review of the Klein's video leaves no doubt that it constitutes critical commentary on Haas's video. There is also no doubt that the Klein's video is decidedly not a market substitute for Haas's video. For these and the other reasons set forth below, defendants' use of the clips from the Haas video constitute fair use as a matter of law.
A year and a half, we've been dealing with this shit. This is a win that we all made happen together.
This is definitely, we all won this together. And a big thank you to Philly D, who turned this from our problem into a community problem. He's the one who was like, yo, this affects all of us. And he mobilized everybody into this great cause. So I thank him. I thank you guys. This is really a huge collective win for everybody. And I'm glad that we had the opportunity to be the ones to fight it.
And they were right. It really was a win for the entire YouTube community, because had the clients lost, everyone in this space would have had to tread carefully before criticizing anyone or any entity. And because of that win, Ethan Klein was celebrated as the father of fair use on the internet. He also subsequently set up a FUPA fund to defend other members of the community from frivolous lawsuits that they couldn't afford. And regardless of what you think of Ethan Klein now, we all still owe him a debt of gratitude for the precedent that his 2017 lawsuit set, because YouTubers still enjoy the benefits of it to this day, including the individuals he's suing, like Denims, ironically.
The undisputed purpose of the defendant's live stream is to contest, criticize, and mock the plaintiff's message, which the courts have found weighs in favor of fair use due to its transformative nature. And they even proceed to cite Ethan Klein's case.
So watching Ethan Klein go from being the father of fair use to the arch nemesis of fair use has been incredibly bizarre to watch, not to mention dangerous, because if Ethan Klein successfully can sue his critics into silence, then he risks overturning the very precedent that he set. But we now have Denims to thank for fighting Ethan in court, because her victory strengthens the precedent that Ethan Klein set even more. So everyone should now give her flowers for what she did for all of us. And even though she only got a tentative victory, I think that it's obvious her reaction to Ethan Klein's content nuke of Hassan Piker constituted fair use under any good faith interpretation. But a lot of people in this space who also benefit from commentary content, they don't want to acknowledge that reality, because the people Ethan Klein has been suing all happen to be leftist content creators. And because of that, right-wing content creators who used to hate Ethan Klein since he was more left-leaning are now cheering on Ethan Klein since he's trying to take down their biggest ideological opponents. They either don't care, or they're not smart or savvy enough to realize that this could also affect them too. They simply love watching a wealthy person crush people with no money and no power, because, I mean, they are conservatives after all, so that's the essence of their worldview. But to add insult to injury, Ethan Klein's lawsuits are equally as frivolous, in my opinion, as the various lawsuits once waged against him that we all opposed. He is suing Idubbbz because Idubbbz shared a screenshot of streamer Destiny falsely accusing Ethan Klein of abusing his children. And that comment from Destiny, to my understanding, was retaliation for Ethan Klein discussing sexual misconduct allegations against Destiny on its podcast. But even though Idubbbz denounced Destiny's statement, Ethan Klein is still choosing to pursue a lawsuit against Idubbbz for something somebody else said. Because in a statement to Moist Critical, who questioned why Ethan was suing Idubbbz and not Destiny, Ethan Klein admitted Destiny lives in the USA, where defamation laws are much harder to win, versus in Canada, where Idubbbz lives. Now, he also says Destiny made it clear that his passing chat message was never meant to be taken seriously, but it begs the question. If the original statement doesn't constitute defamation by his own admission, how is it defamation suddenly for someone else to share a comment that he claimed was never intended to be taken seriously, especially if that person says, this is a bad comment? I mean, it's legally dubious at best, but I don't think the goal is to win a defamation lawsuit against Idubbbz. I think the goal is to punish Idubbbz for criticizing Ethan Klein, because Ethan Klein is a petty prick who seems to think suing people and destroying them financially is a proportional response to what he feels is unfair criticism. For example, I'll let Noah Samsen explain why Ethan Klein is suing him.
About a year ago, I released this video, the YouTubers who backed genocide, and in response, Ethan Klein immediately began threatening to sue me. Then, a year later, just 2 days before the statute of limitations was up, Klein filed his lawsuit. In the complaint, Klein alleges that I defamed him by falsely painting him as a supporter of the genocide of Palestinians. The complaint presents 6 allegedly defamatory statements, including the title and thumbnail of my video, and it makes several claims related to statements made about Israel, Palestine, atrocity propaganda, Nakba denialism, misinformation, and more. There's a lot of stuff in this thing.
In other words, Ethan Klein is basically suing him for sharing his opinion about him. Like, that's what the lawsuit seems to be about. And out of the 5 faces featured in Noah Samsen's thumbnail, Ethan Klein, to my knowledge, is the only one to actually follow through with a lawsuit. Back in 2025, Mudahar, whose face was also on that thumbnail, accused Noah Samsen of defamation too and threatened to sue him, but just over a year later, he decided against it, writing that he wasn't planning on suing Noah and added, "It wasn't a smart move, even cease and desisting him in retrospect. While I disagree with what he said about me, I think he has a clear right to say it. I don't want to also destroy him financially over a YouTube video with legal fees." And that's the position that most of us have adopted in this space, because if you're lucky enough to be a full-time content creator, one downside that we all acknowledge is that you're going to have to endure criticism, especially if you talk about sensitive subjects like politics and Middle Eastern geopolitics and genocide. Like, there's no escaping that reality. If you are a public figure who discusses controversial topics, you will be criticized, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly. It happens to all of us, okay? The spirit of free discourse that smaller critics capitalize on is how we were all able to build platforms for ourselves in the first place. So for those of us with larger platforms to then start punching down on smaller creators for doing the same thing we all do, it'd be like us kicking the ladder up behind us to punish our critics for the same type of shit talking that made us who we are. It's just hypocritical. If you're going to dish it, you also have to be able to take it. I built my platform by harshly criticizing powerful people, so I would be a hypocrite if I turned around and then tried to silence the people who criticize me, because they're essentially doing the same thing that I did, even if I think they're objectively wrong and cruel towards me. And we all rely on this mutual understanding to exist in this space, because if we start suing each other, like, we start to bring the whole fucking space down. It's mutually assured destruction, which is why even if we hate each other, we don't do things like this. Because if the overwhelming fear of litigation becomes the norm on YouTube, thanks to people like Ethan Klein, the space as we know it will cease to exist. And that's the main point that Moist Critical drove home in his video about Ethan Klein's lawsuit against Idubbbz.
There's always been like an unwritten rule on the internet, not just YouTube, where if there's beef online, it stays online. And you handle it online without, going over that threshold, the event horizon of trying to use litigation to silence your opponent or something like that. That had always been etched in the stone tablets, the fucking 10 commandments of online discourse. It's harmful to, I think, literally everyone involved, and does have potential ramifications for others way outside of it. I have never and will never be a fan of extreme litigation, and I have always been vocally advocating against creators going that nuclear path, and I always will. Of course, there are cases where it is understandable. Like I said, going after the snarkers that sent a fraudulent CPS thing through and the skulls and stuff, that one I do understand. But this one, I could never support that, and I just can't see the real just cause behind it. And I think it is a terrible example for other creators in the space to follow, where maybe they believe that even though this is about like a Canadian defamation lawsuit, well, maybe they can try their luck in the States. It's not like defamatory lawsuits are exclusive to Canada. There's better protections here, no doubt, but still, if they take from this that maybe the way to fight battles online is to go the litigious route, well, then it's just a huge mess across the board. I think it is just a very bad precedent. Even if, the lawsuit doesn't end in a victory for him, this way of engaging with discourse, I think, has always been frowned upon, but for some reason is starting to get some more support behind it, and I just fully disagree with it. I think that this is genuinely just a, big threat across the board to just the entire space. If discourse becomes fearful of like litigation flying back and forth, it's going to stifle a lot of voices and stifle some very like legitimate criticism down the line. It's just not something I want to see become commonplace.
And that's the thing. It arguably already has chilled free speech, at least to some extent, because Ethan Klein has demonstrated that he will go after anyone no matter how small they are. And even though you can't really quantify the effect that all of these lawsuits is having on the public discourse, I suspect that much more people would be calling out his litigious behavior if they weren't also afraid to catch a lawsuit. And again, even in the video where Charlie disagreed with Ethan disproportionately, he added caveat after caveat because he knows there's an inherent risk anytime you talk about somebody that litigious. But it's reaching the point where the commentary community has no choice but to condemn this behavior because it poses a risk to every single person in this space. And Anthony Fantano made that exact point in his video about Ethan Klein's lawsuit against Denims.
No matter what problem you have with any of these people, personally or politically, whatever, you cannot be using this as an opportunity to destroy internet content creation and reaction content, commentary content. I don't care how up your own ass you are. I don't care how psycho you are. I don't care how demented or mentally ill you are. You cannot be using your millions of dollars and you cannot be using your platform to sue and go after other creators simply for the sin of reacting to your content, good or not, and having their own thoughts and opinions about it that you don't like. I feel bad and I regret ever having platformed you and had you on my own channel on a podcast and pushed people in your direction because you turned around and ended up doing this. You're literally using your platform and literally using these petty disagreements, your own emotions that you're so tied up in this situation to destroy the very industry that we all operate within because you're mad that you're getting criticized. Are some of those criticisms unfair? And are they coming from like weird terminally online psychos that are on Reddit or this platform or that platform? Yeah, I'm sure some of them are. I deal with those types of people too all the time. But to be going after other streamers for commenting on your content, and if this lawsuit ended up going in Ethan Klein's favor, effectively would have destroyed the business model of anybody and everybody doing the same exact thing. Reacting to other content, commenting on other content, transformatively critiquing and pulling apart other content that would have created such an ugly, horrible, just destructive, slippery slope. And you did it over some bullshit.
He's right. And to expand on one of the points that he made, defamation is a real thing. Not all defamation lawsuits are frivolous. What Alex Jones did to the Sandy Hook families is what actual defamation looks like. All of this shit that Ethan Klein is being criticized for is obviously not tantamount to defamation. He's clearly a petty rich person who refuses to allow any criticism of him to go unchallenged. That is his reputation now. And a lot of the comments under Anthony Fantano's video joked about how he was next for daring to even talk about Ethan Klein. But as a content creator myself, I understand how hard it is to fight the urge every day to not crash out whenever you happen to see criticism of yourself. We're all human beings, and it's a difficult thing to endure, right? And especially with regard to Ethan Klein, he has been subjected to cruelty that I think is crossing the line. Obviously, he had CPS called on him, and that I unequivocally condemn. The person who did that to him, it was harassment, and I think he would be within his right to sue that individual. And, you know, as somebody who has dealt with threats to where I live, which I'm not allowed to discuss, I won't get into that, I empathize with him and wanting to make sure you protect yourself from these kinds of things. But because I experienced this doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who criticizes me is responsible to those threats that were made against me, nor does it mean that I have permission to just be a piece of shit and sue anyone who criticizes me, right? I feel like you have to be reasonable, and this very clearly is unreasonable. You know, but as difficult as it is to be in the public eye sometimes, we're still really fucking lucky to be able to do this for a living. I would do this any day over going back to the retail industry. Trust me. Like, we might not be able to do this forever, though. And I think that that's what makes this so frustrating to me. This is something that is a blessing, for lack of a better word. I'm not a religious person, but it really feels like we are lucky to be able to do this as our jobs, right? But the reality is that we might not be able to do this forever, especially people in the political sphere like myself who talk about politics given the direction that our country is headed in. And if Trump gets his way and Section 230 gets repealed or struck down, it might be lights out for every fucking person on social media. And regardless of where you stand politically, I think you have a responsibility to condemn people who threaten to destroy this space that we all love and share. Having said that, I will encourage Ethan Klein to file just one more lawsuit against himself for defamation, because there isn't a single person more responsible for actually damaging his reputation than him.
Alpha male, not a beta male.